Good morning. This is Christopher Starling in conversation with Erin Smith for Recognize Our Pride, interviewing queer members who are part of historically Black fraternities and sororities. I am Chris. I represent the In the Life Archive 2.0. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing. Thank you so much for allowing us to be your witness. Thank you for letting us hear your story. Hopefully somebody can be a witness. Somebody can get a witness from hearing your story.
Oh, absolutely. I love any opportunity to talk about experiences that add to a collective because, it's so many of us in so many different places and all of our experiences are different and our stories need to be told.
Very so much, especially when I was in college, I didn't know anybody who was openly queer or queer in general part of D9. There was kind of like, I think people talk about like a separate conversation. So I love the page because we get to highlight people's experiences and stories and go, hey, how is life living, navigating these intersections that you live in? So it's dope.
Absolutely.
So Erin, how do you identify yourself as part of the LGBTQ community?
So yeah, sure. So I identify myself as a queer, trans, non-binary person. My pronouns are they, them. I recognize myself as, I see, and this is fun, I don't know if I'm Southern or Midwestern because I'm from Kentucky. So the geographics kind of like are
border states.
It's a border state. It's 100% a border state. Like we have a spot called the Cumberland Gap, which is the gateway to the South. And it's just like, well, okay, sure. Like, but you order sweet tea, our sweet tea is sweet. So, it makes a difference. So I would like to say that where I live, especially in Louisville, is a fusion of both those places. So, but yeah, that's just a little bit about me. I'm also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Cool, that's lit. So let's talk more about your identity. So you are trans and queer.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth about your queer and trans experience identity.
For sure. So I came out like around 2009, 10. So I was like a freshman in college. And it was very black and white. Like you're either gay, you're lesbian. There was a lot of hate, still a lot of hate towards bisexual folks. Trans identity was still honestly developing language, developing so many things in the areas of transness. And the communities of queerness that I saw were extremely transphobic. So it wasn't until like honestly like my grad school years, like 2015, 16, where you saw more of that language get developed, where you saw like the evolving of queerness and the spectrum expanding outside of what we already knew. So settling real firm into my queer identity like towards my late 20s, where I love when everything was a spectrum came out, like, oh, everything's a spectrum, gender's a spectrum, sexuality is a spectrum. I was like, finally, like, this is where I 100% feel myself. And I feel like I don't have to pick and choose, because for a very long time, there was still a lot of cis heteronormativity within the LGBTQ community that I did not resonate with, but still felt like I had to pick a side, mostly from outward peer pressure. Like, oh, what are you? Who are you? Like this, that, and the other. It's like, dang, can I just exist as myself, like in the bubble? And the more you exist within yourself, the more you're ostracized, you had less community. So it wasn't really until like the 2016, 2017 time where it was like, okay, I'm just myself. I am queer. My transness is, non-binary, because I felt like, as much as I've grown up as a cis woman, that really never felt me. And a lot of times it felt like cosplay. A lot of times it might have felt like I was in drag.
That's good language, actually.
But it's like I'm cosplaying as a cis woman, where it's just like, this doesn't 100% fit, but it gets me to where I need to go. And I think we as Black folks have to do that in so many different ways, right? The masking and trying to navigate a world that was not built or made for us. So yeah, so me finally settling into my transness was understanding, like, I exist within this large spectrum of identity. And that's where I love to, sit, and that's where I love to exist, because it's like, you know, if you want to know me, then you can get to know me, but you know, it's not black and white. Who I am is not a black and white thing.
So how was the journey of getting support during time of transition and kind of evolving who you thought you were or could be? How was it finding community and getting support?
Still finding my community, if I'm being completely honest with you. My partner is also trans non-binary, even though they look very, very cis and very femme. They're a trans non-binary person. And we both often have this conversation of, you know, who our community is. We find community with other queer folks who are open-minded, and who understand not just racial disparity, but queerness, and understand privilege, and understand all the uh, things that we often encounter in our lives just as ourselves, which is very, very real. So the community that I have, you know, is one, willing to have these conversations, willing to have these discussions, and it's not every community. I still struggle finding a lot of Black queer spaces that are open to, you know, these dialogues and this diaspora of just the spectrum of queerness and sexuality. It's still very, you know, in my area and some of the areas I've been, there's still a lot of transphobia within, you know, those spaces. And I find solace with like my Black trans folks as well. Like that's really, you know, become a community and a supportive community. And even though I'm non-binary and trans, my transness is still respected, and I am seen as a person that is on a very wide spectrum. I'm not pigeonholed, and I don't like being pigeonholed in so many areas, but that has been, you know, my most supportive community. And you know, we're some of the best relationships I have formed. Like my elders are Black trans women. My elders are those who aren't honestly like aren't that much older than me, but have had a different lived experience of life and have really paved, you know, a way for me to be who I am, and actively defend me in spaces where I am not safe or secure. So
Give me an example of one of those people.
oh, oh man, I have one person. Her name is Victoria Simone Taylor. She is a DJ. She is a Black trans woman DJ here in Louisville. Her reach is expanding to beyond, like, in various regions. She's doing more gigs in Indiana and Ohio, a little bit of Tennessee, but she's been a performer. She's been a showgirl because she is trans. She does not, you know, she does not identify very much as a drag queen, but very much as a showgirl. Definitely was able to tell me a lot of history of Black queer identities here in Louisville, and some of her experience. And it turns out, and I didn't find this out until we actually started having a conversation, she lived on the same block as my great uncle, who was a closeted gay man and a minister. Yeah, so she lived on the same block as he did. So we were in the same vicinity without me even knowing it as I was a child, which is very, very beautiful. Because like when I talked about my uncle and my uncle's friend, who I now, you know, identify as Miss June, because Miss June was trans, but didn't. Once again, when you're dealing with senior citizens, they do not have that language. But yeah, like knew the same people I was talking about, and definitely like saw a lot of similar things growing up, which was really beautiful. Another one is Dawn Wilson. Dawn Wilson is a Black trans woman who's a world-renowned fencer, here out of Louisville, and coaches and competes all across the world. Like she has a very long-standing career in fencing community and has experienced a lot of just blatant transphobia in competitions. She's very aware of like how she has to, because she coaches kids, and she's very much aware of like how she has to coach kids, and just how her presence being a Black trans woman is already, you know, just visibility that a lot of these kids have never had before. But because of her expertise in her sport and as an athlete, and as an advocate here in the city, you know, she is a powerhouse. And another one is Miss Leah Holstead. Miss Leah Holstead is a very popular drag performer here in Louisville. She's originally from Texas, but has made Louisville her home. And she's she's constantly trying to like open up, you know, nights just for the Black community in predominantly white queer spaces as a drag performer. So pretty awesome individuals that I've been, you know, surrounded by, especially in my early 20s, finding myself, finding my identity and growing up. So for me to look back on, you know, each of them and to see where I am now at 32 years old, like they really have seen me grow and mature in community.
Yeah, I run the NLA Archive is 2.0 is an oral history project, basically a Black queer art digital archive. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do them because I wanted to make sure people's stories, like the people you just mentioned, were archived, highlighted throughout the diaspora. So I've interviewed people. Most archives that are Black and queer are very cis, like a lot of Black gay men, a lot of Black lesbians, but they're not stories of people who are trans or non-binary, sexually fluid people. So listening to talk about the people, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to meet them. I can't wait to meet them. It's like, again, it's like, there's an archive in the Schomburg called In the Life. It's been around for 25 years. And In the Life is like the largest collection of Black queer material in the country. The Schomburg is the biggest Black archive in the country, but like there aren't enough like lived experiences like, oh, hey, how is it like finding community, getting partnership, buying your house, raising your kids? How is it a pleasure and desire and going to work? Like these things that we don't we live in currently, we don't talk about historically speaking. And I love talking to elders because they have a great grasp of like how to build community in a way that we don't understand as social media people. So
absolutely. And how they've had to find community differently because they didn't have social media, or social media was still like in the very infant stages compared to what we have now, and they were still able to like build and find community and navigate and find those spaces.
Even just like there's another archive where people are archiving Black queer clubs on nightlife. So it's like, because again, like there are probably places that existed, how people got together and gathered together that we don't have anymore. Even in New York, we have 4 places, but they used to be more. They were smaller and kind of like niche, and like, so I'm like, oh yeah, you have pictures of the party and where was it at and who was there and who was the drag performer and who was it, like, and all this kind of stuff for the last 50 years. It's kind of like just oral. There are many pictures of stuff, so it's like it's really important for us to archive it. Really dope.
Absolutely.
I'm jealous of you right now. I'm jealous, like I want to meet them too. So where do you feel the most safe as a Black queer person?
I feel the most safe as a Black queer person when I'm around other queer POC. And I specify POC because our experiences are very, very different than our white counterparts, right? I've had a lot of racist experience in queer spaces because they were predominantly white. And, you know, my partner who's Latinx, like, has introduced me to their community and their mi gente, who are all queer. And so it's like, I feel safer in queer spaces that are predominantly POC versus predominantly white queer spaces because of, you know, obviously racism, and then just like the allowance, and this is a conversation that I've seen happen a lot, the allowance of cis hetero people to come and take up so much space in those spaces. I'm like, yeah, no, not about it. And it's not just existing, it's very much just making a lot of noise, getting a lot of attention that, you know, can honestly be gotten anywhere else. And now you're here in a space that is coveted for queer folks, and you're taking up the same amount of space that we get in the outside world. It's very toxic. So the safest spaces are always like Black, brown, queer, POC, trans affirming spaces. And a lot of times, you know, those spaces are created outside of clubs, outside of nightclubs, because also recognizing that our community does struggle with addiction and substance abuse and alcohol. Bars are not great places for people, you know, for everybody. Clubs are not great places for people, for everybody. So
nor are they always,
Go ahead.
Nor are they always safe.
Nor are they always safe, and the introduction of, you know, those things can make a place very unsafe very quickly. So I like, you know, checking out open mic nights that are ran by, you know, Black and queer folks creating those spaces, going to events that just want to provide like sober events and more events that are focused around just providing safe space versus having a good time. Because honestly, when the space is safe, you will have a good time. Like it's very simple.
We hope. We hope. Because I don't know, but we hope.
We hope to have a good time. And yeah, so a lot of the spaces that I find safety in are often created. They do not exist to the day-to-day, but they are made in a particular event or time. Because like you said, we do not have Black-owned queer spaces here in Louisville or in other parts of the state. We have more spaces that are trying to become aware and hold themselves accountable, because we have a community where if you don't hold yourself accountable, we will clap back and very loudly and put you on blast because we're just tired of it. So yeah, so that's something that, where I find space and solace. And with my friend group and with my partner's friend group, has definitely become like an extended family, an extended area of community that honestly I did not have until my late 20s, early 30s, like now, because just life and just trying to figure out replacing things and trying to break away from the bar scene. It's really hard.
What brings you the most joy about being Black and queer?
What brings me the most joy about being Black and queer is being in spaces with other Black and queer folks. Like, I love when we see each other and we actually see each other. It's just like, hey, fam. And it's just like this real, like, quick, chatting up and knowing that, okay, I know that in this vicinity at this time, there is at least 1 to 2 to however many other people who are like me and who do see me. And that makes me feel comfortable. That makes me feel safe. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And then it's kind of funny because a lot of the spaces that we do have are very like cis heteronormative. So we can find like that bombastic side eye, be like, did you just see this? Like, yeah, I just saw that. And it's nonverbal, and it's just the nonverbal solidarity and communication that can make you feel safe. But also it's like, yeah, I saw that. You gonna leave? Yeah, we gonna leave. All right, yeah, let's do.
Which brings me to the conversation on AKA, because AKAs can be sororities in general, but AKA specifically can be very straight and very heteronormative, heteronormative. I have a friend who is are they trans? I'm not sure. No, they're non-binary, but they go by they them pronouns, and they are she to death in AKA, and they love AKA, very proud of it. Like, it's a thing they did, but I'm always interested in their experience, because I'm like, oh, this thing is hyper feminine, like hyper. It's a thing that people listen to. I wonder about your experience. It's been first. Let's start with why AKA. Why did you decide to become AKA?
So growing up, I saw AKAs a lot growing up. My mother's an AKA, my aunt's an AKA, my godmother's an AKA. I saw AKAs a lot when I was growing up, and I'm a 91 baby. So early 90s, seeing a lot of community events, community service events, programs hosted by AKAs. Kentucky Derby's real big here. So there's like the Derby brunch and all these other things, MLK Day celebrations, AKAs. And that's what I saw growing up. However, because I was growing up and I was in school, I had my own clubs, I did not notice a shift in the culture and the focus of AKA until I got to college. And I had a hazing experience that I now have PTSD from. Like, I was hazed, I was ostracized not because of my queerness, but because I was the one sought out to have leaked the hazing information, even though that was not true. No one asked me, no one sat me down and talked to me. The only one who did was someone who I had bonded with because they were in law school and because we had very similar ideas. Like, my degree's in political science, they're in law school. We had a lot of like conversation outside of just what's going on. It was very in-depth and focus on like what's going on in our country and our communities, this and the other. So she was the only one who actually asked me what had happened. And yeah, it was just very, very hush. It was very isolating, and I did not feel safe. So we went through all the investigations from the school, went through AKA investigations, and I had no contact with anyone from my chapter, from my line. And so it was just like, okay, very much like, approved me to be in this organization, but when it came time to actually sit down and have a conversation and I tell you my experience, you're going to deny me my truth and then ostracize me. So my last semester of college was very, isolating, was very unsafe. I stopped going into Black spaces. Why? Because our Black space was very small because I went to PWI. And they were full of Greeks. So it was like, whether it was within my organization or every other organization, no one was communicating with me. So I was then pushed out of the community, and I didn't really have a queer community because the queer community was all white, and very, very young. And, and yeah, so it was a very, very isolating year. I did, have my bouts with depression. I had some people who were checking in on me. And it was just hard. So I graduated and hadn't really had a chapter affiliation since, because the other barrier was economic barrier. AKA has a very strict way of like getting reacclimated into the organization, but it hits you very deep in your pocket. So if you're young out of college and you're trying to find a job and the jobs you're finding aren't paying more than minimum wage, you're not going to be able to have $2,000 to get reacclimated into the organization. So while I stayed in touch from the outside, it was very much like I don't have a chapter affiliation, and my mother doesn't either, and my aunt doesn't either, and my godmother doesn't either. It's kind of like, we stay affiliated by what's going on in the community, but it's like we couldn't come up with, them dollars, and they don't have, our area and the chapters that we have here do not have payment plans. They want all of it up front, which, that's a lot to ask for. It's a lot to ask for. And as I realize it's a very unique regional issue, or it's a very unique state issue, because I talked to other people in other states, they don't have those issues. It's like, oh yeah, I break it up into a payment plan, or hey, we can do payments through Intuit or Venmo or Cash App. And I'm like, that's very accessible. You're making, that chapter has been made very accessible. Ours have not been. And we have 2 graduate chapters here, and then we have like 4 or 5 undergraduate chapters in the state of Kentucky. So, so yeah, it's like the structure is causing a lot of issues, but also too, like, my trauma. And I stand in my trauma because it's like, this is something that has happened to me. I do not want it to happen to anyone else. This is something that needs to be talked about and fixed. And there came an opportunity. There was a meeting discussing my undergraduate chapter and what had happened and trying to get it reactivated. And they wouldn't let me talk in the meeting because I had not gone through my, the reaffiliation process. And I haven't gone through like whatever vetting system that they had that I had to pay into and travel to, that was 6 states away, which made it inaccessible. And I did not know until the day of the meeting, after I'd taken time to write what I was going to say. As someone who's greatly affected by this experience, and mental health was affected. So it's very, you pay to play, and that seems to be valued more than anything. Because I also have been able to connect with other AKAs, other mass presenting AKAs, other queer AKAs. They do not have these problems. Yes, they recognize that there is like areas of homophobia, but they also feel seen, they feel valued, they're able to actively participate. And I was like, I do not get that here. And which tells me it's very much a regional thing, it's very much a state thing, and it's a problem, and it's going to greatly affect, and has affected, membership and activation. My cousin, who I am very close to, who knows all of me, and we are very much friends and cousins, did graduate and pledged graduate, is active in both graduate chapters. And she recently told me that she is just general. And I asked, I was like, what happened? You were so active. Like, I know this was your thing. Like, you put in a lot of money, to be an officer and all these other things. Yeah. And she told me what had happened. She was like, yeah, I went to a chapter meeting, and this woman had the audacity to ask me who I was and if I was in the right space and if I should even be here at all. Yikes. And so from that moment on, my cousin said, you know what, I don't need this, because I've been active within this organization for X amount of years and was, accomplished in their role that they held in a previous chapter, coming to a newer chapter. So she said, I don't need this. And so she went to general. And I was just like, that is extremely sad. because I know like the quality of person that my cousin is and the work that she had put in. But it's really sad because like it is that attitude that keeps people from either reactivating or wanting to be involved, or even encouraging new generations to look at the organization. And it also encompasses queerness, because my cousin, had someone who was like openly queer, openly a lesbian, who was married with a child, and saw the things that she had to deal with, like with other members talking about her. And my cousin's very much like, why does what they do bother anyone else but you? Like, they're taking care of their kid, they take their kid to school, they're a responsible parent, they're active, doing all the things that you do for your children. Like, what is the difference? So she was seeing a lot of what I have received as well. And it puts a bad taste in your mouth, and you hate to see it. But what gives me hope is that I do hear about other queer AKAs who don't have these experience, who have very positive experience. I also work in reproductive health and justice.
Okay.
And we had a really big ballot measure last year, and not one soror asked me to talk about the issue that was on the ballot, even though I had honestly been in articles in TV interviews for the past 2 years because of that ballot measure. And not one person asked me to talk about it at the level of a chapter meeting or just voter information. No one. My mother had a whole career in government, an entire career in government and politics and voter engagement, and unions. And they only really called on her when they wanted banners because the regional conference was coming, or they were doing something, they wanted a proclamation. They didn't call her for the information.
She's not financial, so they don't really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what was happening. So we both, like my mother and I, we still have these conversations. Like, so much is happening towards the bodies of Black women, Black and brown women. And the base where these conversations should be happening is not happening. My aunt was corporate America, had a whole career in corporate America, a divine resource for like anything business related, owning your own business, developing your own business, came out of retirement to teach high school kids about business, never been tapped into, never been reached out to. So here we are, all three of us, with, two with careers and retired age, and then myself still out here, still very much in community, and we don't get reached out to for anything other than a favor. And I don't get reached out to at all.
Yeah, but
Like,
AKA, these orgs are bigger than your area, so
yeah,
the beautiful part and the hard part is to which is why social media can be helpful, is like building community with queer AKAs who don't live in Kentucky, right? Because like,
right.
it sounds like those people value a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know of again. Assuming in the interview, I want to connect you with my friend who's non-binary in Chicago. I'm like, because y'all would mesh really well, and like she with the shits. But he's gonna let a pause to hear your experience. I also am not surprised about your
Right. It's like, it's not surprising, but still.
No. But I also want to encourage you because something drew you to that sisterhood, that thing a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, after they graduate, have to do some soul searching around why is it important to you now, right? Like,
right.
Yes, that happened to you. Can't choose how you were born in. Can't choose whichever you were in, like, but you can choose later what you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
it nothing to do about being financial, right? Because to me, being active is about like community, sisterhood,
Community.
and you can still get that outside of Louisville, right? Sadly, you have to do outside of Louisville, but you still can get that outside of Louisville.
Yeah. My community within AKAs actually grew when I started TikTok. My partner, who is my partner's in social media, digital communications, like that is their jam. And they're really good at it. So it was my Founders Day, and they encouraged me to do a post for Founders Day as my as a mass centered, AKA. And I did a post, and they helped me edit it. They did all of it. And the amount of other sorors that I saw, like just in support and in community, from so many other places, so many other states, and also like, yeah, me too, good to see another one, come up to Michigan, come out to California, come up to Harlem, because we're here. That really was an eye-opening and such a comfort. It was such a comfort experience, because when you are in spaces like, where I'm at, it can feel very isolating, but like you said,
And
social media and
yeah.
lonely. It can be isolating and lonely, but like social media and those type of communications in places like Recognize Our Pride, like that is the connection that I didn't have in 2009, right? We didn't have it like in the early 2000s, but we have it now, and definitely another sense of family and community that I feel, here and now, and so happy to have that, and happy to tell other younger folks, like, hey, this is a group that I feel like you can find community in, and helping them find that community early in their Greek life years, which is such a wonderful thing to have. So I'm very appreciative.
I also did it. Like, I interviewed a gay man who was an Alpha, was 50-year member of Alpha course in '68 in Philadelphia. He
Nice.
was gay. His profile was gay, so he had never known a life in Alpha that wasn't surrounded by Black gay men. But nobody identified as gay. So I was like, okay, how do you identify? He was like, as human. And I was like, okay. And my point is, like, there was a community that has always existed around this thing, but it wasn't labeled that way.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of like make flyers, right?
Right.
They were like, hey, we're gonna go to convention and buy out the gay bar in the neighborhood, and when after convention is over, we're gonna go to the bar and hang out, or we're gonna go to somebody's house. So-and-so's house is gonna be the place we meet at, right? So all I'm saying is that, like, it just, people should use social media as a tool, but also like get together.
Yeah, like actually
go to the place and like get a hug, because you might need that shit. Like,
absolutely,
that, like, our Black queer love exists and should be an active thing, not just a thing we kind of over process.
Right. And it's very much like similar to like the Black queer church. Like, we are in church, we are actively in church, and we carry church with us, whether it's actually in an actual church or a place that we've made to be our new church, right? I wrote my thesis project about this. I was like, yeah, we have been forever in the church. And even if we are kicked out of the church, those lessons and those beliefs and those values and the music we still carry with us, and we will put it into the other spaces that we occupy without the brick and mortar that we may have come from.
I found out that was it not one of the founders? Somebody's AKA important luminary was queer and had a house with her partner in DC.
Lucy Dixlow.
So
she's the incorporating founder of Alpha Kappa Alpha. Yeah.
I didn't know this because I grew up different. I grew up with Delta, so I'm a little biased. So I didn't know who the stars in that organization. I don't know what it is, but I didn't know they had houses now landmarks for Black queer people when it comes to history in DC. It's like, I just want to gather, right? Like, the pages are really important, the page is dope, but like, get together and have dinner.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot wait to connect you, because like the person they are dope, and y'all have each other use it, not just fight the power by yourself. It's a very lonely, taxing, exhausting experience to do it by yourself.
Absolutely.
And you join an organization.
Absolutely. And I was at a conference last week and running into more D9, because we were all like in some type of ballot measure work, some type of reproductive health justice work, or whatever the state issue, and connected with Delta, connected with SG Row, and we all recognize like this is an issue. But to hear someone's experience in Michigan and how they were able to build community around this issue, and everyone showed up, and then to hear I think the other person was from Nebraska, is very different, and Nebraska experience very similar to my experience. I'm like, it is truly a regional thing. It is truly like, but there are people out here who hold the same values that we do. We just have to connect and build build that community, because we're out here existing and thriving.
Even in bigger cities, because I live in New York, I'm from Harlem. There wasn't organized gay alpha kind of thing until my friends started it, right?
Right, yeah.
They knew they existed, but they all had a lot of them were operating in silos alone.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody might have the lanyard out, might have the keychain. But nobody, there was no like, because to me, community is not just like, we all part of the same thing. It's like, no, like, you belong to me. It's a different conversation community. And most people don't get that. They go like, no, we're all Black, we're all part of the same community. It's like, no.
No.
We are all not part of the same community.
No.
Page is like, oh yeah, there are people now who are openly queer on some level, but a lot of people who openly queer on social media don't put their affiliation on their page or in their bio. There's some pain, there's some cognitive distance around like this thing people do. So it's like, all you can community know. So it's like the people who are your people, find them, hug them. Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm in town. You want to get a meal? Whatever it is, but like, there was no intention around the curation of the community.
Yeah.
And we hope that the Black colleges, the Black institutions do a better job, and they don't. Which brings my next question is, what thing you think could AKA do differently to deal with queerness in the sorority?
Acknowledge it. Just acknowledge it. Like the fact that one of our founders was a queer Black woman and a tennis champion, the first Black tennis champion in the country. Like, we don't recognize either of those things. And I even watched the Felicia Rashad narrated documentary that's on Amazon Prime. There is no mention of her queerness, her athletic accomplishments, only the fact that she helped incorporate Alpha Kappa Alpha. And I was like, that's a shame in itself. Or the fact that they did not mention by name the other sororities that spurred from the initial C that Alpha Kappa Alpha. So, like, even though Deltas, yes, I understand the dissension, understand how like it broke up, but still acknowledge them. They are still an organizational powerhouse by themselves. And yes, there was disagreement how we started, but that was over a century ago. Like, why are we still living in this like in that hurt, and have not fully healed from it, or just say, hey, y'all doing your thing, I see you.
It's not really hurt. It's just kind of like, I always view it as like siblings shading each other. Like,
it basically, yeah, it kind of is, but it's like, well, like I have Deltas that I am very, very playful with, and we kiki and we laugh about it. There are some older members who still take it to heart. I'm just like, y'all need to let that go. I'm pretty sure it's affecting your health, your blood pressure, cholesterol unnecessarily. Like, it's too much in the world.
When it comes down to it, it's not real. Because I think people's passion, figuring how they show up, may make it look or feel more real. Yeah. But those same people I know have people in their lives who are not AKAs adults, and they like, yeah, it's not it's a thing and not a thing.
Right. And it's just, yeah. So when I see it, it's like really weird, but like to just acknowledge queerness within your organization. Like last year, I actually had a comment deleted last year because it was Pride Month. Mm-hmm. And there have been no happy Pride, no, and celebrating diversity, no type of even like corporate level messaging, branding around. There was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. I just saw the same post about the mammogram bus. I'm not gonna shade the mammogram bus because it isn't neat, or some other like program. But I was like, y'all, it's Pride Month. There are global prides happening in San Francisco and New York. There are like, you can't ignore this community. And then they finally did a post towards the end of the month, and it was misspelled. And it was just like, you waited to like the last 3 or 4 days of June to give a very it felt passive aggressive post saying happy Pride, and there is like a typo. And they had to turn off comments because myself along with other sorors were like, really, this is what y'all did? Like, it's the end of the month, where have you been? Just like, it didn't have to be anything, just like happy Pride to the queer community, blah, blah, blah. Something real simple, no more than 10 words. And it was like, no. But what I've noticed, like, so many more people are calling that out, which is beautiful. But it's just like, just recognize us. We deserve to be recognized. I'm not saying we need a whole day. I'm not saying we're trying to take over the boule. I'm not saying any of that, but just recognize that we exist and recognize your founder. Because to me, that's just like the ultimate hurt, is like to not acknowledge your founder as their true self. And knowing that she had a partner for years and that they lived together, like, and supported each other through all their accomplishments and development in the early 1900s as Black women. Like, that's a huge thing.
Bobby Russet is not included in the Q's honorable members.
Yep.
queerness does not come up ever. County Collins and Alpha, like we can go down a list that they're not unique in that.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't really deal with, they cherry pick the parts of the people's
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments, pass themselves to, and leave it alone.
But it's like, the chair for me is like, we're cherry picking parts of history. What difference is that than those fighting against critical race theory? What's the difference? Because if you're going to talk about, oh, we need critical race theory and people need to learn about our history, I'm like, yes, but you're also participating in the removal of our history. You're participating in that. You know, we need to talk about these Black queer individuals and trans individuals who did a lot of work and did a lot of movement. Like, we hear about Marsha P. Johnson, we need to also talk about Sylvia Rivera, who was Latinx. And I think she was
Major, or Stormy Loverly.
Miss Major, yeah, like Miss Major, and all these other wonderful, wonderful people who contributed to not just Black queer folks, but Black folks, period. And we need to honor them as much as we are honoring, you know, everyone else. So for me, it's just like, just acknowledge that, acknowledge it, and say it out loud. Do not be shameful about it, because that is part of the real resiliency of Black Americans. To do that. So like, that's the biggest thing for me, is like to be acknowledged, to be seen. And while I am very much aware, like, individual chapters are doing their things and they're being really, really awesome, that needs to be across the board. But the fact that it's not starting from leadership to come down, that's what the problem is. Because if you want to talk about our government, talk about, oh, leadership needs to be this so everyone else can know how to follow. It's like, okay, but that's organizational too. That's on everything.
Into the choir. Although I think the Black queer people who are part of OWT deserve a lot more than acknowledgement. But I guess it's a start.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I mean, for me, that's like the biggest thing. And even so much to where even my mother has noticed like a change in her, like change how she's approached, because they'll approach her without mentioning me, and she'll call that out. It's like, you're not gonna, you know, not mention my child who's out here doing XYZ on state, you know, local, national levels. And that's not fair to them. That's the erasure of them. Which, you know, that was a long way coming, but she's like very much like, no, like, my relationship has changed because of who you are and how you know, walk into the world. And that's how it was, and that's how people just don't do anything for you anymore. That's pretty much how she says, like, and that's how you get people not to help you anything. But yeah, like, the acknowledgement needs to happen, you know, and I'm not, you know, saying get a float in the pride parade, but I'm saying something as simple.
Though it'd be cool if NPHC.
It would be really dope.
In New York, the unfinished orgs do it all the time.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm gonna have to come see that.
I don't have a float, but they march every
year. Okay.
Yeah. I was in college, so yeah.
I mean, I'm also the current board chair for the Louisville Pride Foundation. So I'm wearing. Thank you. So I'm wearing like 2 hats, and this is like, I'm here with funds and resources and space, but no one wants to like reach out and be that person. So it's like, okay.
We already established your city and your area is unique. So by you going to these meetings, doing these things, and wearing para is visibility enough, because then there will be somebody who is seeing this Black person who is queer, visibly queer, showing up in pink and green, and like, oh, they are now safe, right? You are now safe, in a way that they wouldn't have had somebody on their yard that might have been safe enough to talk to.
Absolutely. I'm actually in the process of like rebuilding my paraphernalia, because, you know, I grow. I grew a bit. So
we all do.
I grew a bit, you know. The COVID 20 stuck with me.
I'll support the movement because I make para. So
hey, I'm here for it. But yeah, I'm building it up just for that, to that purpose, to be more visible. Yeah,
you should though. Like, it's the thing. Like, I have a friend who runs the Black queer Alpha group, and he didn't have any para. I met him. I was like, so yeah, I get you had all the stuff that happened to you when you were on. I get it's been 13 years, but also you can also like cover yourself in love, right? You can be like, yeah, I don't fuck with them, they don't fuck with me, they mad at me, whatever. But look at my I got the best shirt in the room. No, seriously.
In the room.
And not even saying the shirt isn't matter, but it's like I can read the conversation on something else. I don't have to keep reliving reaction on my trauma. I can focus on love. Like, oh hey, somebody loved me and doesn't make this for me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody was proud. Somebody was so proud of me joining the organization. They made this for me. I can focus on that love and change the story, the narrative, or I can just keep talking about what happened to me, right? Because, and not saying it's you should dismiss it, but it's like it already happened. What can we do on it?
Mm-hmm.
Or you can be flawed. You can be a fly non-binary person who happens to be in the room.
Right.
Like,
yep.
Like, yeah, I hear you. And
I'm still here, and like, yeah,
we're here.
Absolutely. No, and 100%. Like, I love to, travel and link up. Like, I still call. I was like, "Hey, soror, I see you." Like, walking through the airport, I did like several times. I will get into conversation with the soror so quick while I'm traveling, and tell them where I'm from, and and we are having the best kiki. And it's just like, well, God bless you, and that's a loving gesture. That is very much a loving gesture, just to be acknowledged and to have those conversations unbiased and just talk and be really real. Because at the end of the day, all the same issues that are affecting one is going to affect the other, right? And sometimes it's like you can be a witness to that without even having to stand on your soapbox, just by existing and being present in the room, and being fully confident in like who you are as a person, and that is enough for people to be like, okay, like, yeah. And that's something we talked about, like in the conference that I went to. It was just like, we need to get to a point where we recognize that an issue affecting one group is going to be an issue that affects everyone. I mean, look at Florida. Like, look at what happened in Florida. Like, it's happening. It's like, it shouldn't take all of this for people to understand that. It needs to start smaller, or it's going to look like Florida, who is actively finding out right now, right? So,
Harvey Milk always said that they don't know someone personally affected, so it's hard to make a change when people aren't affected by it personally, right? If you know somebody who's queer personally in your life, it's harder for you to say, fuck that thing. If it's like black, for you. So it's like it's different when you have a lived experience. Then people usually are more receptive to a conversation, but a lot of people, it's like them over there. So it's easier. Okay, I don't care about that. I don't care about that shit. Especially when we're black too. Same thing. It's like, oh, I don't care about that shit. Like,
I don't care about, yeah.
Okay. It's easier.
It is easier, but I also think, with all the things that we've witnessed in our lifetimes, thus far, that's something we have to grow from. And if you think about it, like if you think about Fred Hammond with the Black Panthers, that's why they executed him, because he was building that. He said, hey, this group's problem is everybody's problem, period. Like, that's it. And what happened to him, like, along with a lot of other Panthers that share the same ideals, they are no longer with us. And that was orchestrated by those who feared the Rainbow Coalition, feared everyone coming together and feeling empowered. Like, all the oppressed people together becoming empowered is the scariest thing for people who continuously do wrong to the oppressed. But it's very real. Like I mentioned, like, my partner's community struggles in their communities is also my struggle, because like how you see individuals like able to live their life. Yes, you're good, but someone else isn't. And you need to recognize that, one, you're very privileged to live the life that you have, but recognize that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done so that everyone can have the same opportunities that I've had or that I've been blessed with. I live near Churchill Downs, and I live near the backside. There are about 200 employees that live on Churchill Downs with very little autonomy on when they can leave and when they can come back to the property. Slave labor, that's exactly what that is. That's indentured servitude. They live above the stables. What does that sound like? Carriage houses. Who lived in carriage houses? We did. My family has a history of being backside groomers and trainers and those workers, but we were able to start there and move into a different, socioeconomic status or tax bracket and do other jobs and other skill, there are 2-3 generations still within the backside. That is a problem. Like, that is an active problem. And this is also a problem that I share, that I take on, and vice versa. And that is something that I think, we have to be better in recognizing, that. And it's the same thing with D9. It's like, hey, the issues of this group of people is going to be our issues too. The issues within abortion access and reproductive justice should be 100% our issues, especially since Black folks ain't never had autonomy over our bodies and still don't. Black maternal death rates, are ridiculous. Like, our mortality rates in this country are ridiculous. We have stats of third world countries, but still claiming first world. That should not be, but that's exactly what's happening. So in the midst of all these things that are happening, we still need to have these very, very hard conversations. And yes, you might be uncomfortable, but decisions are being made with or without you. You need to know what decisions are being made. And that's 100% something that, I actively stand on and that I try to bring into spaces. So like, I mentioned my Greek affiliation when I was at the conference. Like, yeah, I'm Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We, in my state, did not talk about the issues in the platforms that we should have talked about these issues. But I am hearing that in Michigan, that happened. And that is absolutely beautiful. And we need to figure out what you all are doing and how it can be orchestrated to fit Kentucky or orchestrated to fit Nebraska and these other places where we know these conversations aren't happening. And I know D9s are a force. Like, all of us together, that's hundreds of thousands of people. And until we are able to really get together and figure out what are the issues we need to take on as an entire group, not just as a fraternity or a sorority, but as an entire group of people, and support other orgs or support individuals or support, legislation. Like, our lobbying power could be monstrous if we can organize and get it together. Or even the community outreach and the projects that we do within our communities can be so great, and just being aware of those issues. But we are a force. And sometimes I worry that some people might be afraid to tap into that full force because it is a lot of responsibility. But to even start having the conversations, right?
I'm ready.
And it's just like, but and it's so interesting because I still hear people within our orgs like, oh, I remember Dr. King, this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, but that was then. We still need our Dr. Kings. We still need our other individuals. And as active as you were involved in that time needs to happen now.
He was an alpha. He had a sigma and a kappa and a Q with him everywhere he went.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's like, we don't carry ourselves in that same way. And we should. And there's been no reason for us not to. Like,
I mean, there's some reason. Not we value, but there are reasons why this happens.
I mean, I think for me, it was like when Kamala Harris was running, it's like, oh, that's my soror running. That's my soror running. And I was just like, yeah. I wonder if she got the same support before she ran for vice president or president. I wonder if
she was alpha. I'm proud. I'm sure she alpha chapter. So it's
right, and I'm sure.
And also, did she leverage it though? Right? Because again, we don't know if we are assuming that she may have access to it or bought into it. A lot of times, people don't utilize that affiliation until it's sexy or attractive.
Right, or a benefit.
So
right.
A lot of people join organizations and use it as a resume booster, and that's it.
Right. And like, I love my soror, but it's like, how many other young Kamala Harrises do we have that we are actively not supporting or unaware of because of whatever reason or whatever block? Like, what is that? Because it's like, she had to go through so much to get to where she is. How many of us are right now trying to get to a level, whether it's like vice president or someplace else, but we just need support. We need to have dialogue and conversations and make sure that we're supported. And it's not just about business or entrepreneurship. I think, AKAs here are really big on business and entrepreneurship, but it's like, I know a lot of social workers. I know a lot of teachers who need support and love and encouragement.
But the one thing people have to deal with in D9, a lot of the problems is about class.
Yes. We have big socioeconomic gaps, major.
And everybody's a college educated person. So it's like, hey, it's beautiful to be on fire about advocacy work or doing the work when I was in college, but now that I know to pay, I got to pay this loan, it's different now. And that truth around what people really value shows up as they get older.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing meeting you.
It was amazing meeting you. I love it. And I love to share contacts.
Of course. Where can people follow you at?
Let's see. My Instagram is e.smith127.
Okay.
And that's like pretty much at this point, it's like my primary source of just like social media communication. Also, like my tips.
Because people can support you with.
Say it one more time.
What else are you working on that we can support you with?
Let's see. Absolutely. So I work in abortion access and reproductive justice here in Kentucky. We are dark, so our work is a little bit harder. So Kentucky Health Justice Network, we are actively fundraising to continue to provide those services. And we do trans health and gender affirming care as well.
Dope.
Yeah. So Recognize Our Pride actually shared a post of mine for our annual fundraiser, but I'm continuously posting things from us. So Kentucky Health Justice Network is another way to follow me. KY Trans Health is another, Instagram handle that, is through my organization. So those are the best ways to do that.
Dope. So I'll tag those things in the bio when I post the picture. Also,
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you again for allowing us to be a witness. It was really a pleasure meeting you.